Alrighty, everyone, welcome to our pre-calculus workshop for today. The first example that we're going to begin with is writing an equation of a line in point-slope form, slope-intercept form, and general form if a line is passing through 2 points, 6, -5, -2, 5. All right, so the 3 forms that we have for a line are the point-slope, slope-intercept, and general form. The point slope form is given as y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. All right, so in the point slope form, you definitely need a point. That will be your x1 comma y1. And m, again, is your slope. The second form is y equals mx plus b. That is precisely your, I'm sorry about that. This will be precisely your slope-intercept form. And lastly, you have the general form where it's given as ax plus by plus c equals to 0, where a, b, and c are all real numbers, okay? Now, in order for me to write out the equation in any one of these forms, the very first thing I got to do in this problem is find the slope. So since they tell me that I have some line that passes through 2 points, there's a formula that I use to compute slope, right? The formula that we use to compute slope is the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Essentially, that's your change in y over change in x, right? So change in y over change in x. And you say that this is equal now to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now look, it doesn't matter how you label the 2 points that were given to you, as long as the subscripts, the 1 and 2, stays consistent. For example, the first point, which is given as 6, -5, you could have labeled that as x1, y1, but you could have also labeled it as x2, y2, right? So you could say that this is your x2, your y2, your -2, 5, you could label that one x1, y1, right? So if I want to compute my slope, m, we say this is equal to the change in y's. So it's y2, which is -5, minus y1, which is +5, all divided by x2 minus x1. So it's 6 minus -2. Okay, let's do the computation now. For the numerator, -5 minus 5, you could apply something called keep change, change. Have you guys heard about that acronym before or phrase? Keep change. Okay, so we keep the first -5, we change the minus sign to a positive, and the 5 becomes a negative. In the denominator, you'll have 6. The negative becomes a positive. -2 becomes a +2. All right, let's work this out. In the numerator, -5 plus -5 is equal to what? -10. And in your denominator, what's 6 over 2? 8. Now, that's your slope. You can say that m is equal to -10 over 8, but you can simplify this just for computation purposes. What's the number that goes into -10 and 8 evenly? 2. How many times does 2 go into -10? 5. How many times does 2 go into 8? 4. So you can reduce this to -5 over 4. All right, so now that I have my slope here, now that I have this value, I can go ahead and write out my 3 forms of the line, beginning with the point slope, right? So for point slope, all again you need is a point and your slope. So does it matter which point I use as my x1, y1? No, I can use any one of the 2 points. So let's just say I use the first, the one where I label it as x2, y2. That is your 6, -5. Then what we're going to have is, by the formula, y minus y1's value, so that would be y minus -5, equals -5 over 4 times x minus x minus 6. Now, this is your point slope form, but one thing to note is that if you were doing this problem, let's say on Pearson MyLab, it would ask you a lot to simplify your answers. And if it was asking you to simplify this particular answer, wherever you see two negatives, you would just combine them and make it a positive. So do you have any two negatives next to each other? And yeah, where? Yeah, the y minus -5. So the y minus -5 becomes y plus 5 equals -5/4 times x minus 6. So that would be one equation for us. If we want the slope-intercept form now, the slope-intercept form can be found by just rewriting the point slope form in y equals mx plus b, where essentially you isolate the y by itself, right? So if I start off where I left off with y plus 5 equals -5/4 times x minus 6, I'm just rewriting this equation in such a way where I have the y by itself. So first thing is, distribute the -5/4 inside the parentheses in the right-hand side of the equation, okay? The left-hand side, you just leave it alone for the moment. Now, if I make my distribution here, you get -5/4 times the value of x, or the variable x, and then you do -5/4 times -6. So how do I work this out? Well, I'll ask myself, what's -5 multiplied by -6 first, right? That's going to be what value? 30. And then you say divide by 4. Okay, so you say 30 plus 30/4. The 30/4, you can leave it alone for the moment. Why do I say that? Because I have to now subtract 5 on both sides, right? The left-hand side of the equation was read as y plus 5. I need to get the y by itself. So we get y equals -5/4 x. Now 30/4 minus 5, we essentially have a fraction minus a whole number. So aside here, you get 30/4 minus 5. You can rewrite 5 as 5/1, and then find the LCD. What is the least common denominator between 1 and 4? Or least common multiple? 4, right? In order for me to subtract these two fractions, they have to have the same denominator. So the least common multiple, or least common denominator in this case, is 4. So the first fraction, no changes. In the second fraction, I'm changing 5/1, where the denominator becomes 4. So the only way for me to get that is if I take 1 times 4 to get 4. But because I'm dealing with a fraction, whatever I do on the bottom, I got to do it on the top. So I also have 5 times 4. So what's 5 times 4? 20. So you get 30 minus 4, 30/4 minus 20/4, which is 10/4. Right? So this is a positive value. So you get 10, oops, my bad. You get 10/4 as the y-intercept. So that's your point slope form, your slope-intercept form. We can also do the general form. Oh, sorry, let me just change the font size. It's way too large. There we go. All right, so for the general form, it's ax, again, plus by equals, plus c equals to 0. So all I gotta do is just convert the slope-intercept form back into general form. All right, I'm basically moving everything from one side of the equation. I basically want to have everything on one side of the equation all set equal to 0. So it's y equals -5/4 x plus 10/4. So how does this work? The first thing that you do is you clear your denominators, okay? Well, if I want to clear my denominators in this example, I could multiply 4 throughout the entire equation. So if I take 4 times y, that's going to give you 4y equals 4 times -5/4x. Well, because I'm multiplying and dividing by 4, what happens to your force? If you say it louder, it what? It cancels out. That's right. So if you take 4 times y, again, it's 4y. 4 times the negative 5 over 4x, the 4's cancel. This gives you negative 5x. And then if you take the 4 and multiply by 10 over 4, the 4's will cancel. You just left with a positive 10. All right, now the 5x and that positive 10, I got to push it over to the left-hand side of the equation. So I'll say I add 5x and I'm subtracting 10 to both sides. You could have done this on in one step or 2 steps, but I'm doing it in one. So the 5x on the left on the right will cancel. The 10s will cancel. So you will have that right-hand side of the equation is 0. Now for your left-hand side, it's 5x plus 4y minus 10. Okay? And that will be your final answer.